There we go. One out of 20 kind of experience. Okay, I'll call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 at 2 p.m.-ish and from everywhere in cyberspace. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're fortunate to be gathering together today on the unceded territory of the Símpcwemc people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. There are late items, but item 3.1 has been taken off the agenda for today, and we'll probably do a special meeting to deal with that one once it's completed. There is 3.2. Is there anything else for late items before we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda with the one late item? Moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor Banford. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the February 1st council meeting. Any errors or omissions? If not, can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Moving along all the way to delegations. Item 10.1. Ms. Milner Carnes, come on down.
Hi, thanks for having me to the meeting. Yeah, I just wanted to come by and say thank you to the District of Clearwater for your generous donation to Raise a Reader Day. I know if that happens in September, but I usually don't find out till December how much the government has matched our funds. So just, yeah, I wanted to say thank you very much. We were able to raise $16,400 for our community. That's a 77% match of the funds that were donated by businesses and individuals in the community. And we're going to be using that money this year for a lot of it is going to youth and preschool programs like Mother Goose and youth tutoring, the Family Literacy Week events that we just had that were around the community to get people to unplug from their tech devices and get out with their families and play. We'll be funding and supporting the Come Read With Me workshops for parents, teaching their children to read, some food workshops, and supplying materials for the early years programs for early learning literacy activities. So once again, thank you very much.
Our presenters go on forever, so I'm not used to one that finishes quickly. Yes, it was a great event doing the spelling bee. Are there any questions from council of Carrie on this stuff? Go ahead, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. I was just wondering, is that an average year, or where do you usually sit? For this
that is actually probably the second best year we've had. Usually we're around $12,000 to $15,000. Last year was $11,600. So we did incredibly well this year, and a huge donation was made by the Bannister employees themselves, not Bannister the company, but the employees they said a pass the hat, and they donated, I think it was over $2,000. So that was huge. So yeah, it was really, really, really great, especially during COVID.
Right on. Perfect. Thank you.
Shelley, or sorry, Councillor Sim.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. And what a thing to brag about. I'm super excited to go back to the school board and be able to brag about that amount, because I think typically Clearwater, we always, rank really, really high, and gives them, the people in Kamloops, something to wonder about. But on that, I just want to thank you very much for continuing that work, and especially after 2 years of COVID, to be able to keep this program, energized, and to have such a monetary return on it. We need champions like yourself, so thank you.
I was really happy. I should thank Danica Kelly too. She really took it up this year and was out there on the streets, pounding the pavement and sending letters out for us. So she did a great job.
Excellent. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I just want to add, not only congratulations on the fundraising efforts, but also the amazing ways that you invest that money back into the community and the creativity that your team comes up with to support literacy, particularly among the young kids, and supporting the parents. I think it's a wonderful story. Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, I guess maybe one point as well that there's probably some of you know this, but I do get ministry funding from the Ministry of Advanced Education for the adult tutor program, but literally nothing for the youth tutor program, which is actually my most in-demand program. So that's what a lot of this funds goes to, is paying qualified tutors to work with kids in reading and math, kids that are mostly in elementary school. So it's really the important years to get those kids reading well before they hit high school. So yeah, thanks for your questions. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you for coming. Yay. I'm glad to see things that are working well in the days that we're going through. Thank you for coming. You're free to go. Have a nice day. See ya. Moving on to Mayor's reports. A lot going on. I'd first off like to start by thanking those who looked after things while I took a bit of a mental health break at the beginning of February. Took a quiet week off to go run some errands and help some friends, which was very nice. I did, in relation to that, participating in Facebook Free February, which a few people around town seems to have noticed my absence. I also did an interview with myself and another mayor with Shelley Joints, which should air tomorrow, which sort of discussing that in the whole movement, which is in a sense was started by Mayor Lisa Helps of Victoria by opting out 4 years ago as a way of getting her mental health and the way she dealt with citizens. She's a very accessible mayor. There's a zillion ways for people to get a hold of her. There's a zillion ways for people, or multiple ways for people to get a hold of me as well, whether it be via email or through the phone system. But it just make a choice not to go on that platform to do direct face-to-face stuff. Other stuff I've been dealing with in the last 2 weeks, even though being off, TNRD obviously a lot. Some of the stuff around the protests that have been going on, multiple calls with an Interior Health. Good news just coming out about a half an hour ago with reduction in restrictions for event. On Facebook and through our website. That's basically where we're at this point. I've had multiple meetings with the CAO. Going to be talking to a couple of our MLAs tomorrow about healthcare concerns related to the added pressure in the community on our doctors and Medicare medical centers and ERs to do with Trans Mountain and other pressures. So there's a lot to talk about going on in the world right now, more than I can remember off the top of my head right now, and more than I can get out of my really scrambled notes on my laptop. So I'll just move on to Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Yeah, a few things happened over the last couple of weeks. Attended the CEO briefing, which I thought was really well done. Good for all of council to get together and hear that briefing from the CEO on the issues that we need to hear about. Cemetery committee had another meeting. It seems to be moving ahead fairly well. We'll have a couple of things that'll come to council pretty soon. I want to thank our CEO for attending on that call. Really good input from his part in relationship to how bylaws work and what the role of the committee will be and when we can pass things over to council as a whole and the decisions that council would have to make. Had a long citizens phone call right in the middle of Super Bowl, pretty much dealing with some road issues that I've passed on to the mayor a bit and to our CEO. Thank you for getting that handled. And had a bit of interaction with some of the people out front of the building that were sort of protesting. Very polite, very courteous, had a few questions kind of a thing. But overall, it was a short interaction, but it certainly was peaceful and polite. So that's pretty much my weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bamford, for those interactions with the public. It's very useful. Moving on, Councillor Frizzle.
Had a pretty quiet couple of weeks. Good news though, the Alzheimer's support group can get back and running again. Alzheimer's Society has said go ahead, so that's good. The people that have to care for their people need some support, so that's really good. I'm working with the Healthy Living Coordinator and getting seniors doing some projects on the community winter activities. And we're having a bag pickup lunch at the Legion next Tuesday. And, you know, things looks like might be easing up a little bit. So maybe we'll be able to allow them to come in and have a little visit. Not an official lunch, but maybe they'll be able to sit down and visit with some friends and just have some time together. So that's my report.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm hearing lots of things about you keeping people's spirits up and connecting, having these conversations, just even letting people, you know, have somebody to talk to. So that's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough time.
There's a
Yep.
few people that are just really struggling right now. So there's been, a few conversations and a few interventions.
Yes, I think we're all struggling right now. So being that extra voice and being yourself, that's fantastic that you're doing that. Moving on to Councillor Herring.
Nothing update from me this week. It's been pretty quiet.
Just growing your hair out. It's good. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Pretty quiet couple weeks. I do have a couple things. February 9th, I attended the agenda setting with Mayor Blackwell and Mr. Thomas. Got my first dig on that to see how that what involves what was involved with that thing there. Good hour and a half conversation with amongst the two of them in the office. That was good to just kind of sit back in a different setting and, you know, get to spill the beans a little bit on all sides of the table. So that was good. Lots of conversation revolving around COVID, post-COVID, and last but not least, Ottawa. My phone's rang a few times about that. People want to talk, and I volunteered my ears 4 years ago, and I'm feeling it now. And other than that, I'm having a couple video calls with some old friends that I grew up with here, looking to make some investments in the place they still call home. So I'm hoping to keep prodding the ribs and see where that will go. Other than that, that was about it for the last 2 weeks for me.
Excellent. Yes. I appreciate your email updates on what's going on, what you're hearing on the ground out there too. Councillor Sim, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I think probably the couple of really fun things. One is we had the first ski school through Raft River and Vavenby, who came out to the ski hill last year. And what was exciting about that is we had probably close to 75 kids ski, and they skied for $10. And the reason that that was so affordable is because of the generous grant made by the North Thompson Communities Foundation last year. So to be able to pass that on and see all those kids out there, it was like watching kids learn to fly. Super, super exciting, and just huge amounts of gratitude to, you know, not only the ski club, but again, North Thompson Communities Foundation. They afforded a grant that allowed the ski club to pay some of their operational costs through COVID that wouldn't have otherwise been covered. And I have to say that without that grant, I'm not sure that the club would still be standing in the same way. So to be able to pay it forward, the club's been really, really grateful about that. Also, the Birch Lake on the weekend, there was probably about 60 people out and donned in costumes and sunshine, and so that was really fun. Nice to see that that club is working so hard, and they've just got like the best organizer for the Candle Creek Half Marathon. Like all the advertising is out, like all the volunteers are being organized. So another really good thing to be able to look forward to this year. Because of COVID, we don't hear tons about the different intramural sports that are going on, but our CSS boys basketball team is going to Vernon to compete. And I think what's really fun about that is that their coaches are two boys who had graduated from CSS and definitely paying it forward that way. So, you know, more to be grateful for just on the heels of what Councillor McKenzie said. Lots of people who call this place home and continue to give back. Clearwater Youth Soccer, I attended a meeting with them and they are very excited to get started. So registration starts first week in March and is open for a month. They're anticipating record numbers of kids who are going to come forward on that. And I'll just loop back to it, but they are planning on hosting their tournament this June, which is really exciting. Soccer is going to be a big topic in this town. CSS is also hosting their soccer tournament. That's May 6th. Due to some of the accommodation pressures, it's going to be one big giant sleepover for the 8 teams that are coming at the high school. So that'll be fun that way. So looping back to Clearwater Youth Soccer, that's an organization that's worked really hard to ensure that all kids are involved, and the costs for insurance are kind of creeping up. And I wondered if anybody on council would deem it appropriate to extend a grant to CYSA for $500 to assist with registration this year. And just, I know they're really keen on keeping the fees affordable. They've got some equipment things that they need to upgrade, some nets. But I'd love to hear from council if that would be something that people would consider. I know the TNRD has made a donation, so I thought I would bring it forward for consideration.
Yeah, before we do that, I'll go to Mr. Thomas. I'm, off the top of his head, or the Director of Finance, if there is, we still have money in our contingency, I believe, from council contingency. So I just clarify that before we do that, and then I'll open it up to council.
We should be able to afford $500.
Okay. Just got to make sure. Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
So just on a process question, just to make sure we're consistent with kind of all of our community groups, would this be a grant and aid or something different? Because grant and aid,
I think we could look at it.
Is it?
We could look at it as sponsorship. To do a grant and aid, they'd probably have to write a letter. What I do note is that council's been very active supporting a number of youth initiatives. So I'm sure that this group would come forward. But, when I was at the meeting, I sort of looked at, they are so far over 200 kids involved in the program and kind of keep extending it. It just seemed like a good group. That's why I'm bringing it forward if anybody wanted to make that motion. But to do a grant and aid, I think they would have to write the letter.
Okay, so if we frame it as a sponsorship, I think that probably clears that and doesn't get us out of process. We've done sponsorships before. This is a one-off. If they want to return to do this year after year, it would be a granted aid, and they can enter that process through our CAO and Director of Finance. So I'm assuming you're putting that forward as a motion, Councillor Sim?
Yeah, or I'd invite another councillor if they wanted to make that motion.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it up to you all. Does somebody want to make that motion? Does somebody want to second it?
I'll make the motion. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I was going to say I'll second the motion, but Shelley brought it forward. Councillor Sim brought it forward, so I think it's appropriate for her to make the motion, and I'll second.
Okay.
Make the motion.
Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor. Oh, Councillor Frizzle, are you okay? You're saying all in favor? All in favor. Okay, and that passes.
Great.
Thank you for that. Moving on to, after that confusing bit, Councillor Taylor, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. So fairly quiet week. I have driven several times past the lights on the Clearwater Valley Road and still don't know which one I prefer, but I have been doing my homework. And the other thing is just the Trails Task Force. We had a meeting on Wednesday, the 9th of February, and I'll have an update under the committee's reports later.
Thank you. Yes, the lights. Lots of conversations with people about the lights. Okay, that moves us on to Committee of the Whole minutes. There is a recommendation, I believe, Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee meeting. That minutes of the Committee Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee meeting held February 1st be received. Somebody want to move and second that? Moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor. And then moving on to Committee of the Whole reports, Councillor Taylor. There is a recommendation that Council enter Committee of the Whole meeting of the Government Operations Standing Committee. I think you're supposed to read that out, but you
Yeah. Yeah, so our next meeting, we're about to go into it right now. So yes, the recommendation that council enter a committee of the whole meeting of the Government Operations Standing Committee. I'll make that motion.
Seconder. Councillor McKenzie seconds. All those in favor? And then I pass the chair over to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. So I believe I will pass this straight to our CAO, who will walk us through the contents today. I believe we're largely looking at material that we have seen before, but hopefully Mr. Thomas can give us any updates and walk us through next steps.
Absolutely. So I thank you, Councillor Taylor. I would invite everyone to turn to page 19 of the package, which is the proposed 2022 capital and operating projects. Don't worry, Doug, I'll be passing it over to you shortly.
No problem.
There is if everyone's there, awesome. There is a presentation that we'll be providing shortly, but I just wanted to highlight a few changes to the capital and operating project spreadsheet as listed here. So going down the list, we've added the marquee tents, which was an oversight on our part earlier. This was discussed by council several times in the fall of 2021. And the funding source has already been identified in the previous report, being the reserve fund from Trans Mountain Contribution Agreement. The other change that we made is to shuffle a number of the funding sources from the taxation column to use various reserves and surplus accounts that we have on the books. So for example, the 37 East Park development or project, $442,000 project. Also the TMX contribution agreement had earmarked $388,130 for that project. So we've shifted that over as well. OCP 75,000 has been removed. It's one of the yellow highlighted section at the bottom left-hand corner, as well as the Parks Master Plan has been removed. And I believe that was at $100,000. Other than that, I would let Doug provide his presentation, after which we can certainly have a discussion if council wishes. Doug?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. On page 18 contains the summary of council's decisions to date. And that these include the changes made on the capital and special project list provided by, just described by Mr. Thomas. So the highlights, you'll see there's a format change here. And this is a format change that most municipalities in the province are using, where we list revenues on top, we list all the expenses below, and then below the expenses, we show how capital funding is where it's coming from, and the capital expenses according to fund, whether it's general capital, sewer capital, or water capital. And I'd draw your attention to the top line, municipal taxation net, 2.684 million. That is a 1.96% decrease from last year's tax requisition. So we're looking at just a little below 2% lower amount in taxation. And the special projects that we had listed and discussed previously have been incorporated in this budget. And we will be discussing further what council would like to do concerning taxation. We're looking for some some policy from council as to what would be desired and what is desirable. As Councillor Sim eloquently put it a couple of meetings ago, the best thing this council can do is to provide the gift of a properly constructed budget for the next council to work with. And Mr. Thomas and I and senior staff have worked on this to try to get it down to, it's not bare bones, but we're getting close to that. And bare bones is sometimes a little too uncomfortable. You want a little bit of padding in there because as we all know, things happen during the year that's unanticipated. So we want to leave some room for us on that. Before we leave this page 18, is there any questions or any discussion from council as to changes that we haven't discussed previously that should be in here? Hearing none.
Oh, no, I did see Councillor Bamford's hands up, but Councillor
Oh.
Taylor is actually running this meeting, so I wasn't going to say anything until she stepped in.
No, I just have a couple quick questions. That's
Sorry,
all.
my apologies, Councillor Bamford.
No problem at all. On page 19,
19.
line 20, it shows 237 as gas tax for the trail from the Wells Gray Inn down to the roundabout. And last meeting we chatted about a $250,000 leveraging funds that we had from the community forest. I just wonder whether or not that has been sort of ironed out or locked down, and would that free up the gas tax if we did actually have that leveraging money from the community forest? So that was really the one question that I had that related to that particular topic itself. So any answer on that one?
We would have to, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I don't think that's been explored in detail, but my understanding of that funding was that it was for new kind of projects like design work. This isn't a new project. So the idea of that funding was for new things going forward. This was already an existing piece, so I don't think there will be appetite to go back and use that. Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, further to that, Mr. Thomas is probably aware of this too, but sitting on the granting board for community forest, the intention of that funding was to have funds available so things can move forward. It was never intended for that $250,000 to replace grants. It was just to basically be the backstop in the event something went sideways, or to provide engineering so that grants could be applied for. It is not a grant in itself for the construction of trails.
And apologies, Mr. Thomas, you were going to add something. You're all good. Okay.
Council took care of it. Thank you.
Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much. This budget looks so much better. I remember a few weeks ago, and we were looking at 2023 being so high that it did keep one up at night. So this is great. I refer to your comment about being bare bones. And, I don't think anybody wants to be a bare bones community. Having that little bit of a buffer in there is important. Are there things that you would maybe draw our attention to? Certainly, I consider our roads budget something that really needs some attention. And to be a bit of a negative right now, I'm wondering if that line should be addressed.
There is a PowerPoint presentation going over some of the highlights, and we are looking for some council policy on a tax increase, and maybe that could we discuss it there, or we can discuss it here now.
No, I think waiting for the PowerPoint, and then maybe the PowerPoint also includes it, because one of my favorite line items involves events and festivals, and seeing today's news. I just want to make sure we're well covered, because I have a lot of ideas. So I just want to make sure that there's a budget, because I like that.
Okay.
How are we doing for that? Will that be in the PowerPoint?
Not specifically, no.
Oh, okay, but you've got money set aside for my street party and, you know, my bands and, you know, the lights down Main Street? Yeah?
Well, that would be an interesting discussion. It comes right at the end of the PowerPoint.
Oh, good, okay.
So say that'll be a good discussion, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent.
Moving,
So
oh, sorry.
any other questions before we, I'm assuming, any other questions before we move on?
One
Councillor
last quick
Bamford?
question. Are all of the business cases included in the budget?
Some are and some are not.
Okay, thank you.
Some we just didn't have funding for. Some were needing some more development, but they are here as a reminder for council that these are going to be coming back, those that are unfunded.
Okay.
Sorry, never mind.
Okay, thank you.
I'd say the
Moving on.
majority of them are in here. Okay, yeah, if we can move forward in the agenda, on page 20 is the list of reserves and surpluses. This is pretty much what we saw in the previous discussion. I do have an update to this in the in the PowerPoint. I just want to go back to the business cases. The one that's not, I made a comment about some that are not funded, and from my recollection, I don't think the yard expansion business case was funded this year. The business case is here, but I don't believe that was funded this year. Mr. Thomas, do you have any other recollection other than that?
No, I do not. I will do a little bit of digging on that particular one. It appears that it's not in the capital list at all.
Right.
I will do some digging on that one.
Thanks. So perhaps this would be a time then to look at the PowerPoint presentation. And we will cover some of the key issues that we want to, we don't have to resolve them today. It'd be nice if we did. Let me just see if I can share my screen on Zoom. I just have to find the presentation. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet, no.
Okay, then I didn't do it right.
Welcome to the life on Zoom.
I do like Zoom.
Yes. Yeah, we're all becoming quite fluent at not getting it right. This Teams and the other one. Ha! There you go.
Well,
Ish.
okay, that's not what
Maybe
I.
not it. No.
That's not. Okay, let me try that again. Oh gosh.
We were viewing your screen. It did say that at the top of the screen. We just weren't viewing your presentation. So you had shared. It was coming up as the Zoom sort of start window that you
Yeah.
get on whatever. But
Here we go.
Okay, we're on the right track. Thank you.
Hey, I'm still trainable. So this is just where we are as a status. If we can make some decisions or at least have some discussion, so staff can get a sense of direction. That'd be helpful. So one of the things we need to consider is when it comes to taxation, where do we fit when it comes to, I'm having some malfunction here, or is it just big fingers? Oh, it's big fingers. Where do we fit among municipalities of similar size? And I used 1,900 population to 2,500 population. And it was interesting. When I looked at similar sized communities, two stood out as being very high, and that's Anmore and Tofino, primarily because of, for Anmore, it's close to Lower Mainland, high assessments, and they're doing a fair amount with the regional district and district of Tofino. And on the right-hand side of the graph, in the green column is the average, and right beside it, we are right beside it at 1,301. So we're a little below average, and this has to do with just with general taxation. Doesn't include anything else, just municipal taxes. Then we look at it and say, well, some of these communities have major industrial assessments that they can tax. Who are they? And the municipalities with the yellow column are those communities that have major industrial assessments. And so that was an important point, because the major industrial assessments generally absorb most of the taxation and lowers this is for municipal taxes for residential homes, by the way. I should have clarified that, my apologies. So we're looking at the tax load for people. And so this is the municipal taxes here for a residential home. And you'll see where on the right-hand side, the brown column is the average, and for Clearwater, we're 1,301, which is a little above average, just for taxation. There's different ways of raising money. One is taxation, one is parcel taxes, which isn't considered direct taxation, and then there's user fees. So when we include everything, including parcel taxes and user fees, we see that we are still below average. So what that tells us is that we're not doing a bad job at all. We're getting the job done. We're trying to be as efficient and economical as possible. So when we come back to the municipal taxation issue with communities with major industrial assessments, if we were to take those communities out of the mix, where do we stand? And when we take them out, the average is 1,675, and we're at 1,301 still. So we're still below average. That's not a reason to increase taxes unnecessarily. It is a good indicator of where we sit, and basically, can we be criticized for overtaxing? And the answer is not necessarily. In order to evaluate that clearly, you'd have to assess all the services provided by all the municipalities. And obviously, I haven't done that here. But this is just an indicator of what it was costing taxpayers as a whole for the services received in Clearwater. As far as taxation is concerned, from 2015, we can see it growing up gradually. And the yellow column, 2022, is a slight decrease. And we'll be discussing that as we get on further into the session here. So we are a little below last year, just a little under 2%. And this is a caption of what we saw earlier on page 18 or 19, I think it was. And people look at this, and except for a few of us, people have a tendency to glaze over. So I did want to mention one thing, one important thing, and that is sale of service. We're at 1.894 anticipated, next year 1.9 million, and then we go down to 1.3 million. That is made up primarily of the dumping fees for Trans Mountain. They're dumping their septic sewage into our system, and they're paying the regular fee for it. We expect that to be going on for 2 more years, and then it'll be dropping off. So that's why that is up a little higher than normal. But looking at it graphically, this is how our budget looks like overall. And we can send these out to council if you want to look at them a little closer with a little more time.
You go back one slide.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Now just looking at the big fall off seems to be government grants, which you don't know, and then transfer some surplus. And the surplus may change next year too. So
Yeah, the government grants primarily are from what we are have applied for the trails. That makes up the bulk of it. So some of those projects in capital are dependent, and some are wholly dependent on government grants. And if we are unsuccessful in obtaining those grants, then the project would not go forward. So yes, it is a higher amount for this year because of those grant applications. Good question. That's a good observation. So you'll see the municipal taxation portion up in this portion here is not terribly high compared to other communities. When you look at their budgets, sale of service is up, of course, as we mentioned, and government grants is up because of the projects in capital for the trails. The next portion is the expenditures, and you'll see the capital expenditures of 5.3 million is primarily of the trails and the other projects that we've listed on there. And this is what the expenditures look like. You can see the capital expenditures take up quite a portion of the budget in total. And that's a bit of an anomaly. It's 2022 we have a lot of grants out there applied for the trails, and that's what makes up the bulk of it. So this, when it comes to the capital budget, as we mentioned, the trails makes up a large portion of it. And as I said, those are dependent on government grants. And if those come through, it's going to be a very busy year, and it'd be a good year. So that's the budgets as they look in a graphical format. I find putting them in pie charts is easier because we can all speed read the pictures rather than looking at the rows of numbers. So what we're at now. Yeah.
Interrupt you, Doug, if I may, is I'm looking at this, this graph here, and it's trails, $3 million But I'm just wondering of that, we do already have what percentage of that covered by grants? Like, it's not like we're anticipating them, we have it covered. So just to make sure, you know, for anybody who is on this Zoom call, that's not a budget that we're expending, because we do have an allocation to offset that. And I think that that might be important to note.
Yes, there's about a little under 2 point, well, let me just check. So yeah, some of that is.
On
there's-
page 19.
Yes, thank you. Is it, yes, 19 is where this figures come from. And this is just total of expenditures. It's not so much the funding so much, how it's funded, it's the expense that we're going to be enjoying. There's a little about what
2.3 million.
Yeah, 2.3 is going to be for is covered from grants for trails.
That's correct.
Right. Anyway, I just share that because that is an anomaly, and it looks like the major portion. So approximately $700,000 is going to be part of the capital budget, but this won't show up next year necessarily. But our water, sewer, you know, fire department, all of the other colors, that will be our consistent for next year.
Yes, in varying amounts. Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, so to me, this really is a glimpse of a strange year. And just to make sure that it's not assumed that this capital budget will look like this next year.
Yes, that's correct. Good point, Councillor Sim. The whole, and we'll give you a copy of this presentation. The whole idea is to make sure council understands what is in the budget. So when you are approached on the street, you'll be able to defend the budget as it was adopted when that time comes, or to discuss when it goes to open house when people have questions. Personally, I always believed in having council have the information to defend the decisions made. I mean, I think in my opinion, the worst thing the worst position we could put council in is have council say, well, okay, go talk to the CAO about it. We think that council should be able to discuss the salient concepts of the budget and to discuss it at a high level with taxpayers. And that's why these charts, in my opinion, are important, because I think people would rather hear from a councillor and the mayor what is happening in the budget rather than having to go and talk to staff. That's just.
I don't think it's staff's job. I mean, the budget belongs to council.
That's right.
Council's the one who makes the decision. Council's the one who sets the tax rate. We're the ones who are totally accountable to the public. So
Absolutely.
Talking to the CEO or staff, to me, is just kind of a moot point, because they don't really have any accountability. It's all on us.
Exactly, and that's why we want to arm council with the information. We want to make sure, and if you need more detailed information, I'm happy to supply it. But at a conceptual level, here's where we're at. And as Councillor Sim pointed out, trails is a bit of an anomaly for this year. And it's trails this year, next year it could be some other priority. And all the others are going to be coming back in one form or another. I anticipate next year the fire department will have a bigger portion for the new fire truck. So every year this is going to be different. This is just for the 2022 year. So yeah.
Can you slide back a pie chart or two? There was one that I just wasn't sure what was. No, not that one. Oh, I don't know. I'll ask you when we get it sent out to us. There was just one part of the pie chart that I just wasn't sure what that actually covered. That's all. But that's okay. Don't worry about it now, Doug.
Well, you can always get a hold of me. We can always go over it in more detail.
Yeah.
And Mr. Thomas is also very familiar with all of this stuff. So if he's, I know I'm not there, but Mr. Thomas is, He's very, very competent in dealing with these issues. And I've appreciated his viewpoint and his assistance. So we come now to this screen. We have the 2021 levy, which all was, and this is what is proposed now, which gives us a difference of around $53,000. And that represents a decrease of 1.96% from last year's taxation. And the question that staff has for council is, in order to have a 0% tax increase in taxation for the 2022 year, we'll need an increase of $53,752. And if we were to do that, what should be done with the extra funding? Transfer to reserves or street parties, just to name one.
Or
not
public works yard expansion.
Yes.
And go back in there, which was earmarked at 40,000.
Yes.
So
So
I certainly have an opinion, but I'm gonna, anyone else from council have thoughts on that? Councillor Herring?
Yeah, I think from my take, I'd love to see a 0, and I'd love to see the balance transferred to reserves, just to kind of improve our future situation rather than spending it right away.
Thank you, Councillor Herring. Any other? Make sure I can see hands. Councillor Bamford?
Just so Doug, so I understand this, right now, by my understanding, if we left the mill rate exactly the same, we would have $53,700 basically extra that we could put into reserves or anything else. That's what my understanding is. So we don't have to lower it. So where I'm sitting right now is leave the mill rate where it is. In my opinion, then we are not increasing taxes. That's giving us a built-in buffer. Most of the change that people are going to pay, myself included, comes from $100,000 increased assessed value. I don't see those assessments going down next year. So we're likely going to be in the same place next year with a really high assessed value, which puts us in a good position. So I'm kind of where Councillor Herring is. Leave the mill rate exactly where it is, which gives us that 1.96% increase that we can use for reserves. We can do what we need to do with it. Thank you.
We need to be really careful in our understanding of mill rate here, because we're not talking about keeping the mill rate the same.
correct.
Because the assessment has gone up significantly. So in order to raise these funds, the mill rate will actually go down. So we're not talking about mill rate. We're talking about, do we want to spend the same as we spent last year so that our community is funding through taxation that same amount, irrespective of the assessment roll, because we don't know where that's going to land? Or do we want to spend more? So I just want to disconnect from the mill rate, because
And I don't know if I can. I'm not an accountant. So if we left the mill rate exactly where it was, what would that do at the end of the day for tax revenue?
we would get a lot more if the assessment is a lot higher.
Yeah, exactly. So we could just leave the mill rate there. We're not changing the mill rate. We're not backing it up, which would be nice to do for people. So it's really a 0% increase in I always look at the mill rate. That's what drives the percent of taxes people pay. So unless I'm wrong, but I mean, I'm comfortable leaving the mill rate where it is. And I know that you're going to come back differently. But
Yeah, if you leave the mill rate the same and your assessment has gone up 40%, what you pay to the district, not to council, to the district will go up 40%. So you're saying you want the tax burden on the residents to go up, matching their assessment.
well, the assessment values, and I agree with, I'm comfortable with where we're going then. And I'm just wondering what would happen with the mill rate if we left it the same, that's all. So I can live with going to 0 quite easily and lowering it, but.
Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, I think we need a professional explanation of that, not the, Councillor Taylor, you have an extensive amount of knowledge, but I think we're going into scary territory here as far as a conversation goes. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Taylor, but I would love to hear from the Director of Finance without going too deep into the weeds in here.
Well, I agree with Madam Chair on the tax rate per thousand is what it's called. It's not, it hasn't been called a mill rate since 1985. But to answer the question in a simple term, if we left the tax rate per thousand the same, we would be taxing almost $3 million, or $3.3 million, which is unnecessary. So as Councillor Taylor was explaining, if the assessments are high, the tax rates are low, will be lower to raise a certain amount of money. If the assessments are low, the tax rate will be high to raise the same amount of money. So it's a balancing act. And if so what we would do is we would need to, what I think is being proposed is increasing our tax levy for 2022 to 2.737,852 is what I'm hearing. And whatever the tax rate per thousand is going to be is what it's going to be. I don't know what that is yet. We don't have the final, the revised assessments yet. So, Mayor Blackwell, I hear what you're saying, but I guess the question is, do we want to tax the same amount as last year? Or do we want to decrease it by 53,000, which right now is a possibility?
I'm going to let Mayor Blackwell respond before we go to Councillor Sim.
At this particular point, it's going to be a decision of council as a whole where that comes in. I am moderately okay with staying to the 2.74 million sort of levy range. I do have some deep concerns though, especially if we can get the messaging out that taxation per thousand versus we're not going to go from 2.7 to 3.3 just because your assessments went up. That's not what's happening here. Right. I do have some serious concerns about some of the things that we do need to tackle here. One you've already mentioned, which is the fire department, and building up either reserves for the purchase of a new fire department. The other one, which constantly comes up with all of us, is roads. Those two files need attention, one saving for the future, the other one because at this point I'm not convinced at all that we're putting enough money into roads. There are more, but I'll leave it at those two.
Councillor Sim.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I echo those thoughts as well. And I think that what we have seen in the past is a fun little Excel sheet that plays around with where we moved things and what that might mean, as well as a comparison. So the one piece of information that I always enjoy each year is if it goes up 0.5%, it translates to a cup of coffee a month. So having that breakdown and yet where it can go collectively, because again, the legacy of a budget, there's also a legacy of that community infrastructure. I mean, today we've already heard about the great big swimming pools outside of Bilo, and they've got some temporary fixes to them, but that's to just bridge us over until they can be permanent repairs. Permanent repairs, long-term repairs are all going to require funding. So for me, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to see what some different ranges would be. I do think that the business case for the public works yard makes a lot of sense. That's long-term thinking, that's sensible, and I appreciated the fact that that business case was a phased in. So I don't want to see our citizens, overwhelmed or overburdened, but I do want to see a bit more of a play because we do have plans that show us where there's needs.
Councillor Taylor, if I could respond,
Absolutely.
that spreadsheet is coming, Councillor Sim. We're just working on changing some of the format of it, so it's a little more understandable. Really what we're discussing is, and you're right, that we do need that sheet, but we're just talking in concepts in general now. And I want everyone to know that I did not prompt Mayor Blackwell to make the statement he did, because the next sheet that we talk about is the various options for tax increases. Now, this is on the right-hand side on the column is an cumulative total. So if council said we want to go up 1% increase, that's going to incorporate the savings plus more. So it'll be an accumulation of 81,000. Or if you want to go 1.5, and the purpose of this table is so we can discuss some long-term things. Yes, we have fire truck is coming up. We do have a reserve for that, and we'll look at that just momentarily. It's not fully funded, but the trick is once you buy that truck, that is the time you start continuing putting aside money for the replacement of that truck 25 years from now. The planning for that has to start at an earlier stage. And we're lucky that we have some funds set aside, but we need to continue methodically putting money into reserves and surpluses to accommodate some of these things. The expansion of the works yard as part of a long-term plan that should have more attention than what it has. So with that in mind, that's why this table is here, to help us think a bit longer term rather than just 1 year. So this is the reserves and surpluses. It's been updated. We'll come back to that sheet a little later on. And the fire equipment replacement reserve is about 578,000. So we're short. I think the new truck, I think it's going to cost, was it 650,000? So, we're close. So, Madam Chair, I don't know what you want to do with this table or discuss it with council.
I think one of the things I'd like to talk about first before we go back to this table is the reserves. So it's great to see the updated 2021, but what are these reserves? My concern right now is we originally had like a 4 or 5% increase expected in taxation, and then we pulled out a lot of things out of reserves and moved a lot of that funding around. My concern is, what are these reserves going to look like at the end of 2022 based on the funding approach that we're taking? Because my concern isn't so much where they are now. My concern is where they're going to be at the end of this year, and what are we handing then to the next council for 2023? If I were to have my magic wand, I would be having a tax increase this year, probably in line with inflation, and shoring up our reserves. So not finding a way to spend that, but finding reserves that warrant building for the future. And so, like, do we have the projected 2022 for the reserves?
I don't have that handy, no. And some of it depends on how we want to budget right now.
Mayor Blackwell, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm Chair Taylor. I'm in line with your thinking as well. Exactly. That's exactly where I feel. I don't want to handicap any future council by going too far into this, and we have shifted a lot of things to being funded out of reserves in this budget. We made that decision in the past as well, and we went from quite substantial reserves to the position where we're at, where I don't quite think we do have long-term sustainable reserve levels here. It's a very delicate conversation here, because I still think we have to be very cautious with letting people understand that your assessment increase is not your taxation increase. I have to say that over and over again. Your assessment increase is not your taxation increase. If we were to request 2% more budget this year allocated to various reserves, or as you stated, inflationary rate, I'm acceptable to that concept. I think wherever that 1.5 to 2.5 range in there, with the full understanding is that we're investing that into reserves for the future improvement of roads or other things. I took a literal snapshot of one of the business cases because I figured there was an excellent piece of information in there. And it's the one with the crack sealing device in the value proposition section. And it states that the reconstruction cost for a 7-meter wide road, which is a standard road in that we know, is $700,000, I believe per kilometer. And if we think of that in terms of our reserves for roads right now, basically, I think we'd buy roughly 200 meters of road per year of what we're spending annually dedicated to roads outside of what we receive in grants. And we really need to think about these things because roads aren't getting any cheaper. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Councillor Sim.
I will happily join both of you in that because it is an eye on the future. And families, they set aside money to replace the roof, and that would be sort of the same concept of it. My other question is around, it's our sales of service. And we are hampered because we don't have a huge industrial base. And so we always have to keep coming back to the taxpayer. So for this year and looking into next year, we do have sales of service with our septic receiving. Is there room in this budget to actually set aside some dollars so a different business case could be developed for other opportunities that the district could do? So for example, Logan Lake, they have their campground, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but other municipalities have looked towards other revenue streams as opposed to always seeing it from taxation. I'd be interested in council's thoughts on something like that.
Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, I think hopefully we get an economic development officer here in the near term for this year. That all works out. People are really struggling to recruit professionals right now, but I think that would definitely be a focus that I would want that person to look at. There's a few things actually in some of the plans here, like public water and septage, like a sani station. That's another fee for service that could come up depending on what we charge. I think there's great opportunities there, but I don't necessarily know if we need to budget anything more for that. I think, but we might have to allocate part of that ECDev person's, economic development person's time. But yeah, I think the other factor to that, Councillor Sim, as you're well aware, I mean, sooner or later, the expansion to the Trans Mountain pipeline will add to the tax base. I think that becomes less and less certain as to what date that will be, or maybe more certain, I'm not sure, but it will have an impact in the long run on what we can do with the District of Clearwater.
Councillor Bamford. Oh, you're on mute still.
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate the comments of everyone, and thank you, Mayor Blackwell, for the bringing up the Trans Mountain thing. I mean, I'm a firm believer of taking 66% of that or whatever and putting it right into reserves every year and just saying when it comes, that's what we're going to do with it. I think for me, having some conversations with some of the staff today and different things, I think the other thing council, it would be nice for council to do, if we look at the infrastructure master plan, if we look at the expansion for water and sewer, if we look at roads, I mean, realistically, there's no way our community is going to be able to afford that. You just can't do that when you're looking at 1.4 million a year for road development, when you're looking at 19 or $20 million without grants of water and sewer development. So I think somewhere down the road, you need to have those hard decisions, those hard conversations about expectations. What can we actually put out to the community to say, what are your expectations? And maybe here's what they're going to be realistically without pricing yourself out of the market. Maybe we need to look at changing some of our road standards and rubblizing some of the roads and taking them back to where maintenance is lower. So some of those different conversations is maybe what we need to have a workshop to look at. Thank you.
Any other thoughts from council? Questions? Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, well, first off, I just want to say I got a lot of respect for you people crunching the numbers there, because I mean, I can do it, but I can't just look at it and have answers right off the hop. So a lot of respect to you guys that do this. Mayor Blackwell, Councillor Sim, I agree with that. We do gotta definitely look long-term with 69K roads. It's gonna haunt many councils to come, I think. And if we can start putting some away, I think we're on the right path between that. Good infrastructure pipes that are might not be in our time, but they're going to be causing headaches down the road, and just the long-term investment in regards to this. You guys are on the right track there, and I can't give you numbers right off the hop. I got to sit and analyze this and do some crunching on my own. I just can't fire off right here on the spot like that. But I think we definitely have to think long-term with this.
Madam Chair, I'll make up what I typically do for councils. I'll make up a little cheat sheet on tax increases, the impact of them on the average home and of selected homes in the community, so we can see the impact between last year and this year. And then maybe that will help. But I appreciate what you've all said, and I agree. We need to be planning longer term. And if I can, with respect, I think what we need to be doing is planning capital long term. I am typically planning capital for other places where I've worked between 20 and 30 years out. And currently we have some planning done for the next 4 years. It's minimal. We need to be putting more focus on what's going to happen in our community, not just 5 years from now, but 10 years, 15, 20. You're going to need this, because when you get into more of capital asset management, your capital plans may have to extend out to 80 years. So here we are, 2022. If we knew 10 years from now we were needing to do this certain particular project, that would give us maybe more impetus or maybe more opportunity to put more money aside in different areas to fund these projects that we know are going to come up in 10 years. Right now, we're running a little blind because we're not sure exactly what's going to happen 10 years from now. And we don't know because we haven't planned for it. So Mr. Thomas and I have talked about this on about 3 different occasions. And we need some longer term planning, in particular for capital. But I will do up a little cheat sheet for you to see what the impact is. I'm working on that now. Well, not that right now, but I have worked on it today. I need more work on it because it does anticipate. We have the variation of the properties that came in to the municipality, where we have to deduct that from that property, the account for a property that came in. We can only charge what the province is charging for other areas in the area. So I'm making a guess at what that is, and then I'll calculate what our tax rate should be, and we'll see what the impact is for different tax increases. I didn't want to put any effort into that until I heard from council as to whether or not you're amenable to that kind of a concept. And if you are, we'll go from scratch, from 0.5% up to 2.5%, and we'll see what the impact is. And then maybe after that information, you'd be in a better position to choose what you'd like.
Yeah, I think that would be great to see. And in a year where inflation is over 4%, I believe right now, even a 2.5% increase is still below inflation. Councillor Bamford, do you have a question?
One quick question. I know there was quite a bit of concern over the last year, the year before, with CAN4 going down and that site losing a considerable amount of revenue, even though the revenue was fixed, unfortunately, in my opinion, in the past. Does anything happen with that site now that some industrial activity is going on there again? And how does that play into it? Has it bounced back at all? Or as that site getting developed, will that add back to us?
You mean in the context of assessed value?
Yeah, I mean, we were getting some assessment, we're getting taxes from that. It looked like the taxes were going to fall off when Canfor shut down to some around over 100,000 a year kind of a thing, because it was going to considerably drop down. And I just wonder, as that site gets some industrial activity again, were we still locked into where we were with the province when that site first got incorporated into the municipality? And now that there's industrial activity going on there, has that bounced back, and will that help with the tax revenue coming in? And I know it's Símpcwemc that's doing some of that, and I don't know how that plays into it either. So there is activity on the site again, though, by my understanding. So
Good question. I can speak to the limitations. I believe that was prescribed by a letters patent. That hasn't changed, and that I don't anticipate will change, but the assessed value based on usage of the property may have changed, and I'll let Doug speak to that.
Mr. Thomas, what was your question? I'm sorry.
Has the assessed value of the Canfor property changed year over year? And if so, by how much roughly, if you have that information available?
I was just looking at that. The assessments over time they've come up from previous years. It's up 38% to 2021. I don't know what it is yet for 2022. That property was moved, as you can. What happens when you have a property that comes in and a supplementary letters patents issued? The province puts restrictions on that property so that the municipalities are not allowed then to go what's called gold digging, where you want to have an industrial site in so you can tax it more and subsidize the residential taxes. So they've limited us on what we can tax for. So when light industrial or major industrial properties are abandoned, after a year, they're transferred out of that classification, light industrial or major industrial, and is put into the class called business/other. So anything not fitting into any of those categories goes into class 6. That's where the other business/other comes in. So those properties were moved into business, and they have, since 2017, it has increased pretty substantially. But then there's some properties that came out. So overall, let me give you an example. In 2015, the value of the property is $9.155 million for that new area that came in. That includes residential and major industrial and business. Today, it sits at $7.75 million. So there is a decrease, plus the assessments have mainly moved into business/other, which is a lower taxation level. So we're getting less money out of it because of that, because of how the taxes are levied by class and the decrease in assessed value. I was just looking, last year we taxed, I think it was around $34,000 is what this sheet is showing me, what we taxed for. So we can charge our regular municipal rates, or the lower of the tax rates levied by the province on properties surrounding areas. And the lower is what is the province charging, and that's $34,448 last year. So it's not a big, it is more money. but it's not the boom that I think was hoped for. If that answers.
I was just curious what was happening with it, if it got changed back to light industrial or something else, or what the fallout was from that when they actually left. But thank you for that information anyway.
Yeah, it's in business class other now. It's not in light industrial, or it's not major industrial anymore. It's all business classification.
Okay, so we're next on the agenda. Is there anything else you need from us at this point, from council?
Well, I think what I'll do is on this table, I'll give you a cheat sheet for each level of taxation increase and give you what the impact is on the average home and then on selected properties so we can see what the overall impact is. Mr. Thomas, do you have another concept we could do?
No, I just wanted to get clarification on if there is consensus on the direction with taxation, if there's consensus on the projects, if there's consensus on the budget being ready to go for consultation. Those are the types of questions that I have. And if not, what changes we need to make.
So I'm Councillor Sim, go ahead.
No, I think you've probably got some good ideas. I'll wait for you, Councillor Taylor.
Well, I'll go to Mayor Blackwell. He has his hand up.
You can start if you want, you know, but if you want me to lead from the middle here, I'm perfectly fine with going at 2.5 moving forward. I'm perfectly fine with all the projects in there, fully understanding that the service yard hasn't been budgeted for in there yet, but that would be part of that 2.5. And I'm perfectly happy with moving forward with this going to consultation.
Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I think that that's an excellent point. And certainly if we did the 2.5 with the eye on the reserves and that long-term goal and vision, and I think it would be, you know, at the consultation, I think that's where we hear from the citizens about how they feel, and having that graph of ratio about how it would impact, because taxes are complicated. There's lots of nuances to it, and showing some comparisons. But that's what citizen feedback is all about. Where do you want your community to grow?
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Councillor Taylor, would it be helpful if we had a show of hands who would be interested in 2.5 and the different, you know, is everyone okay with 2.5? Is that?
I don't think we're proposing 2.5. I don't think we're at a point where we're voting on the taxation rate at this point, but more taking 2.5 for public consultation.
Okay.
So can we get a show of hands that everybody's comfortable with 2.5 being our baseline for the public consultation? Is anyone not okay with 2.5 going forward?
I think you're there tentatively. I see some hesitation, but that's what public consultation is about.
Yeah. So this isn't a vote on the taxation rate. I just want to be really clear, or the taxation increase, but more numbers for us to then have something solid to put forward to consultation to gauge the input from the public.
For me, I guess, I mean, I don't have a problem with going for consultation. I just worry about creep. We started at 1 to 1.5, and then we went to 1.5 to 2, and now we're at 2.5. That's all. So take it to consultation and see where it is. I'm not sure where I really want to fall on a rate goes. I understand building up the reserves and the whole thing. I'd be interested to see what the changes that Doug was going to put together for us for an average value home or whatever else. I think that would be interesting to see. So
yeah,
and that's going to be the real impact on people when you see that. So.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Blackwell, you came off mute. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, and I was just going to make Councillor Bamford points. Percentages are really odd in this town when it comes to taxation. When it quite often comes down to when we do these things, it comes up to a couple cups of coffee. Not to make light of it, but the other part of Mr. Thomas's questions is everybody okay with the projects as presented and moving this to public consultation? I think we've said that for public consultation, but this we also need to ask, are you okay with the projects as presented at this point, knowing that we're still moving things around here? Councillor Sim, I believe, had some points on festivals and things like that, but
yeah, I do just, to me, as we did get some good news from the province today. It's still not the good news that I think that we all want to see finally revealed. Like, dancing super fun, dancing with a mask isn't the greatest, but we're getting closer. And just protecting that social infrastructure, acknowledging what Councillor Frizzle had said before. There are people that have not had the easiest time. I mean, I've heard that time and time again. A lot of loneliness and a lot of isolation, and I'm not asking for like tons of money, but to me, that is an important part of our community fabric and how we get back. And I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is that we have come to socialize in our circles because of the division, and we need to find ways to start circulating as a community. So to me, it really, I do feel passionately about it, and I just want to make sure that it's in there. That's it. Thank you, Mayor Blackwell.
Has council contingency remained the same for 2022?
Yes, they have.
So I think maybe that's where we look for that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. We haven't seen that, so that's the challenge, because we've seen all the projects and everything, but those other details, it would be great to see in its fullness.
Councillor Taylor, through you to council, the legislative contingencies, I think, was $80,000.
Okay, thank you for confirming. So any concerns on all the business cases that are currently included in the budget? I think we've pretty much landed on consensus, but I just want to make sure no one has concerns there. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. Mr. Thomas.
Sorry to ask, is that with the Public Works Yard project included or not included? At the moment, it's not included.
Included would be my wish. I think Councillor Sim's earlier comments that that is a wise decision, makes a much more workable service yard, increases security, a whole bunch of good reasons to do that, thinking for the future. And the rest of council, thumbs up or whatever, or make your, yeah, I think you've got consensus there.
Can I just ask one question on that? How will that be funded? Is it taxation funding or other options there? Mr. Thomas, do you know?
Doug, do you have a theory on that? The default setting would the default setting would be taxation. I was just trying to figure out if there's another surplus account or reserve account we could use. And the value of the project as per the business case is 43,000. So even if 40,000, sorry. So even if that was to be included, I guess, available room from the 1.9 would go from 53,000 to 13,000.
Yeah. I'll have to find where money could be taken for the Public Works Yard.
But I think there's agreement to move forward with that and just
Yes.
finalizing what that means for our taxation decision.
Yes. I'll have to come back with some recommendations for you.
Okay. So we have consensus on the projects, including the yard expansion, and consensus to move forward with 2.5% for public consultation at the open house at this point. Okay. Anything else that we need to cover before we come out of the committee of the whole?
No, I don't have anything else.
Mr. Thomas?
We will be endeavoring to schedule public consultation between the 16th and the 20th 2nd. We are also going to try and post the final figures on the website so people can have a point of reference as well, and make it available in the office. And I may schedule another workshop with council just to go over some of the materials as well.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, 16th and 22nd of which month? This one coming up for.
February. The goal is to have the process of council deliberating on the tax rate by March 1st.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Councillor Sim.
Question on the presentation is the past 2 years we've had to, or I guess past year, we've had to do a virtual. Is it too soon to consider that given today's announcements? Maybe staff could get back to us on that.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. We now have a recommendation to rise from the committee of the whole. If somebody could make that recommendation. That's Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favour? I'll hand it back to Mayor Blackwell.
There is a second recommendation there that staff be directed to schedule a public consultation regarding the proposed financial plan prior to March 1st, regular council meeting, and that staff are directed to report back on public feedback gathered at the public consultation. Mover and a seconder on that one. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That's excellent work. I especially like to thank our Director of Finance. That was wonderfully clear, understandable, and digestible. Yes, very good. Thank you. Moving on to item 14.8, which is Community Economic Development Infrastructure. Chair Bamford.
And our next meeting will be June the 7th.
And there is a refer to recommendation there.
Yes, the council approved the list of remaining projects within the draft infrastructure master plan as presented.
Okay. Is there a seconder on that? And then we can discuss, or actually first, is there any questions of staff on that? It's quite a large amount of paper there, so. Seeing none, Councillor Herring, did you raise your hand to second that? You second that, okay. All those in favor? Good stuff in there, lots of information. It's a really good package. I encourage the public to look it up online. Moving on to Parks and Recreation, Social Development, Chair, Councillor Sim.
The next meeting is March the 1st.
Okay. Standing committee reports, Joint Services Advisory Committee, Councillor Herring.
You're on mute, Councillor Herring.
Next meeting is April 11th.
Thank you. Select Committee reports, Councillor Taylor.
So we had a Trails Task Force committee last week, and we went through an update on all the projects. Lots going on as usual with the Trails Task Force, and we have received Darren Coates' notice to step down from the committee. And so we did put out an advertisement to recruit new members, and we have a recommendation from the committee that David Beck be appointed to the Trails Task Force Committee as a community member at large, effective immediately for a term ending July 2023. So I can make that motion.
Seconder. Councillor McKenzie, I think, was a little quicker than Councillor Sim. All those in favor? That passes. Glad to have such great community volunteer. Councillor Sim, do you know something that I don't know?
No, I don't, but I do have a question because it's so great when the Trails Task Force Committee gets busy, but at the same time, it's, you know, heart stopping, thumping. Has there been any discussion about taking on some of the signage within the community? am sort of working in conjunction with the Community Economic Development Task Force. Again, I'll just cite that it was a priority of the task force, but it seems to me that the Trails Committee is so well in tune what's happening. I'm wondering if that's been an agenda topic or not.
I don't recall that it has. Mr. Thomas can correct me if he recalls something. I know there have been kind of conversations obviously around trail signage specifically, but nothing in depth in terms of kind of a broader program of signage within the community. Perhaps, Mr. Thomas, we could put that on the agenda for the next meeting, if we can run that through the chair.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Mr. Thomas.
Nothing to add?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think it could be a topic of discussion for this. And the next point on the agenda was 16.2, Councillor Frizzle.
Next meeting, February 28th, and I just included that to put onto the agenda.
There you go. See, look at just that quick. Cemetery Advisory Committee, Councillor Bamford, tell us what's going on.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Actually, we had a meeting and our next meeting is March the 2nd. But it was a pretty good meeting. We will have some stuff, recommendations coming to council to deal with just a re-looking at the fee schedule that's there. We finished that part. So I think the next part, the next meeting on March 2nd, we're going to start looking at the actual bylaw. Really good information brought forward by one of our staff. And I really have to thank them for that as far as the terms used and the legislation around it. And thank our CEO for explaining what things we can do and what things we can't do. So it was a good meeting last time. We took care of a bunch of the business end of things, and then we're going to start actually looking at the bylaw itself. So it's going ahead quite well.
Excellent. Thank you for your work on this. This is something that state over and over again has been incredibly important to the community to get done. And thank you for your leadership on that one. Moving on to community representation reports, Tourism Wells Gray, Councillor Sim.
Yeah, we'll look forward to the next meeting, but no dates on that yet.
And the next one is back to Councillor Bamford, Wells Gray Community Forest Commission.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of any need for having a meeting. If we do have a need, it'll get called out for, but I don't know when it's going to come up yet. So
yeah, the society version of the Wells Gray Community Forest Society, which is the smaller grants, is batting around a couple of grants right now, but I don't think there's anything currently that we're dealing with. It's large enough for this to go to the commission, so that's where we're at. Moving on to item 18, draft infrastructure master plan. Which is the other big chunk of paper on your file. There is a recommendation that the council adopts the update to the District of Clearwater Infrastructure Master Plan dated November 2021. Are there any questions of staff on this? Not seeing any. Councillor Herring, were you moving that?
Correct. Yeah, I was trying to move it.
Yeah, thank you. Seconder on that. Councillor Taylor seconds that. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor? I love the pretty maps. It explains so much about our community. I want to put them on the wall, so every time I get asked questions, I know exactly where to refer people to. Moving on, that goes to committee chair appointment, item 18.2. There's a PDF. I'm sorry, I don't know what this is about. Mr. Thomas, maybe?
Sure, I'll turn it over to Deputy Corporate Officer Penny.
Oh, sorry, this is this one here. Yes, I did read this, but go ahead, Mr. Penny.
Yeah, this is just an information report. It has to do with just the chairman, the public schedule we'd released for committee chairs, who would be chairing which committees from January 1st until July 1st. It did appear that when I had that was voted on the December 7th meeting, and at that same meeting we'd also changed the names of the committees, and that had caused a slight problem. It was fully my fault on the public agenda because the names had gotten switched, and so we had thought for the first month that Councillor Bamford and Councillor Sim had switched which committees they were chairing, but that has been corrected now on because the original intention of council was seemed very clear to myself and the mayor and the chief administrative officer, the decision was just made to correct the error that was on the schedule, and that's reflected on your agendas now and the schedule going forward.
Thank you for that. Yes, I am aware of that. I just had a bit of a brain freeze there. Thank you for the work in correcting that. Moving on to item 18.3 ICIP grant sewer siphon upgrade. There is a staff report and a recommendation. Do council have any questions of staff on that? Particularly Mr. Schofield? Seeing none, there is a recommendation that council directs staff to submit a grant application through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, British Columbia Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Stream due February 23, 2022 to complete necessary repairs to the district sewage network. Seconder on that? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. This is basically to repair a necessary part of the sewer infrastructure in Clearwater. And I believe Mr. Thomas is still working on one component of that, which is the new version or an updated version of our water conservation plan. And we will be having a special meeting of council just to discuss that one item so that we can move forward with this. If there's nothing further, all those in favor? Thank you. Not the sexy work, but the important work. There is, moving to item 18.4, 37 East Park project. There's a recommendation, but it's a decision of council. Maybe we can just move to 27 and 28 in your agenda there. Have a look at that. Page. Sorry, 127 and 128 here. So I think the basic discussion here, do we want to move forward with this at this point in the 2022 fiscal year? Or do we want to defer this? Councillor Herring.
Sure, I'll open the discussion. Personally, I think deferring it seems like a good idea. It's being used as a parking lot already. It feels like giving it an extra year is maybe, you know, if that gives us time to get our ducks in a row, that seems like a good idea.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this? Councillor Frizzle?
I agree. I think it should be deferred, but I also am wondering if there isn't some way, speaking of signage, of having some visitor information there that direct to the Clearwater trails, and even having a place where maybe we could advertise things that are happening up in the DLCC area. So you could, farmers market, music night, whatever, just have something there just to promote the area and to make sure that people know that are new to town where things are in town. Maybe we could work with the task force, with the trails, with Tourism World's Grey on all, making sure the right information's out there. And we also should have garbage cans out there.
I agree with you. I think if there's, maybe discuss that or send your suggestions into staff of what you like to do there.
Okay.
I think also it's important because people are doing things like doing oil changes on the site.
Yeah.
We stake this as District of Clearwater owned property for that reason. Anything further? Councillor Sim, I see you coming off mute.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Councillor Frizzle says, which is, you know, such sage advice, is that if this year we could start using that area as the trail access going down to the river, and just, you know, freeing up some of that traffic in that community and just getting people used to it. May not be you know, the product that we want, but I think that there's ways that we can strategically stage it and get people used to using it as parking, especially for the boat launch, and trying to find a way to put lipstick on it so it becomes a bit more attractive. But I think that's, you know, I don't mind deferring it, but certainly let's make use of it and make that a priority.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think that's a very good idea that we maybe look at what the information or signage component of that for basic signage and then move forward from there. And I'll leave that to Mr. Thomas to stew on and figure a way through. And I see him nodding his head on that one. So that's basically it. Does somebody wish to make a motion to, in essence, defer this till the next year with the motion that we move forward on basic signage? I see Councillor Bamford coming off a mute, but I also see Councillor Herring with his hand up. So Councillor Bamford, did you have a comment or were you wishing to move
I
that
was just
motion?
going to move option 2.
Okay. So moving that second, Councillor Herring, are you seconding that option? Thank you. All those in favor? Excellent. Thank you. Now where the heck was I? Oh, right. Item 18.5, draft intern conservation plan. That's coming off the agenda. We will have a special meeting as mentioned before on that. That moves us over to bylaws. District of Clearwater bylaw number 260/2022 amendment, amended 2021 to 2025 5-year financial plan. Staff report is pages 131 to 141. There's 2 recommendations. The first, that the District of Clearwater bylaw number 260/2022 amended 2021 to 2025 5-year financial plan be introduced and read for a first time. Does somebody wish to move that, or do they wish to ask questions of staff on this first? Any questions of staff on this? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder?
I'll move that if there's no questions.
Yeah, if there's no questions, okay. And we do get to discuss this a couple more times, so this is just first reading. So is there a seconder on this? Councillor Taylor, question?
No question. This isn't the next financial plan. This is last year's financial plan.
Right, you're correct.
That's correct.
So this is not the readings of.
This is correcting the corrections to the last year's one that we needed to do in order to get things in line. This is housekeeping.
Yeah, this is housekeeping of last year's budget.
Thank you
not-
for catching that, because this is essentially the reason we're correcting this now, because it wasn't caught last time. Anyways, this is housekeeping on last year's. Thank you for catching that. Councillor Taylor, thanks you for catching that, Mr. Thomas. So mover and a seconder, please, so I can read this sucker again. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Taylor. 2021 5-year financial plan bylaw number 260, a bylaw to adopt the 2021 to 2025 amended 5-year financial plan. Whereas section 165 of the community charter requires that the council shall adopt a 5-year financial plan. Now therefore the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembled and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater bylaw number 260/2022 amended 2021 to 2025 5-year financial plan. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving on to recommendation 2, that the financial plan be read for a second and third time. Can I get a mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Herring. District of Clearwater 2021 5-year financial plan bylaw number 260/2022. A bylaw to adopt the 2021 to 2025 amended 5-year financial plan. Whereas section 165 of the community charter requires that council shall adopt a 5-year financial plan. Now, therefore, the council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater bylaw number 260/2022 amended 2021 to 2025 5-year financial plan. All those in favor? And another bylaw read. So many, so much fun. There are no correspondence response required items. Moving on to correspondence information items. Stop me, wave frantically if you'd like to discuss any of these. Thompson Nicola Regional District Bylaw Services. Seeing none. Or Building Inspection Services, sorry. BC Wildfires petition. Councillor Sim.
Yeah, I think that this is an important one to pay attention to. There was an opinion piece in the BC Forest Professional magazine just recently. And I'm just wondering where we stand on the fact that the current provincial government is very intent on the protection of forest, whereas the protection of forest up here is very different than it is on the lower mainland. And that forest professionals, not all of them, are really asking for the management to mimic nature. And I think that, you know, there's some really great diagrams about the fact that even the fires that were in our area last year is that where the buffer zones were in that new forest. So anything that was replanted, it actually had a natural sort of stopgap to it. We know the statistics, we know for our community, you know, it was amazing that we were unscathed last year, but how much longer? So this type of a petition is something that I think we need to pay attention to. I think we need to be speaking to our MLA about it. And I think we really need to be advocating for the fact that, you know, not all answers are equal. Anyway, those are just my thoughts, but I feel really strongly that we need to be louder about this.
Yes, thank you. Agree 100%. Anything further on that one, Councillor Bamford?
Yeah, just to follow up on Councillor Sim's thoughts, we do have another scenario coming up in the very near future with regards to all the fire chiefs and everything else, and it'd be a good topic to maybe bring up on that as well, sort of just to push it, because a consensus thing could come out of that group, which would be a really good thing to have go forward if we wanted to.
Yes, thank you for your comments. Further? If not, I'll move on down the list. Heritage Week, BC Heritage Week. Nothing. Bill C-26 or 216. And the lovely note. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Herring.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the 216 motion. I'd really like to provide a letter of support to this. Personally, this is, you know, it hits close to home for me, talking about safe supply and overdose prevention. This is obviously something that's affected Clearwater and everywhere else. I'd like to lend our voice as a municipality to this call. It's time to address this. The opiate crisis is in its worst year ever in BC, and it can't slip under the radar.
Okay. So are you moving that we add a letter of support in the vein of the Village of Cumberland to send it off to our MP and to Prime Minister Trudeau? Is that what you're suggesting here?
Correct. Yeah, I'd like to move that.
Okay. Is there a seconder on that? Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Sim, I see that. So all those in favor? Okay, I would be more than happy to sign such a letter. I don't think there's anybody in this room or in our town who doesn't have a personal connection to this now. Thank you. And then the last one is the note on BC Youth Parliament. Sorry, brain's going sideways right now. Lovely note. It's so good that it's too bad that kids can go to that one in person. Moving to comments from the public. Any comments to the public? To the public, from the public. Stephanie, you got anything you'd like to ask us? Mr. Thomas, anything submitted via writing? I don't think so. I don't think I've seen anything.
Nothing for council at this point.
Thank you. We do have to move into in camera. There's a recommendation that meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91B of the community charter, discuss matters related to personal information about an identifiable individual who is being considered for a municipal award or honor, or who has been offered to provide a gift to the municipality or condition of anonymity. Bleh. Some words that you don't say every day. Anyways, can I get a mover and a seconder on that one? Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Bamford. All those in favor? And we'll take a 5-minute recess. Or what are we at now? Yeah, see you at 4 o'clock. And you have to go back into your email there and click on the in-camera Zoom link. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.